Welcome back to our Switch vs Switch 2 video series. After that gigantic video where I tested 135 Switch 1 games, I had a hard time deciding what would be next for this series. Yes, I know you guys keep asking for Ys 9, but I no longer own the game on the Switch, so I'm waiting on a sale to repurchase the game and not just do a video based on the demo. Anyways, I decided to just throw in a game that I play a lot from the card game Yu-Gi-Oh! Specifically, Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel. This is a totally online game, and it's been notoriously laggy and choppy on the Switch. So let's dive in and see just how smoothly the Switch 2 can make your experience of waiting 50 years for your opponent to do their full combo Fiendsmith and Rescue Ace build on turn 1. Here is how I've gotten Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel to run on the Nintendo Switch 1 versus the Nintendo Switch 2. The first thing to compare in this online trading card game simulator are the visuals. The Switch version of this game looked fine as is, but the zoomed in cards were not great. Let us begin the comparisons there. Now, I'm somewhat of a Yu-Gi boomer, as some people would call me, mostly making my decks from classic themes like Blue Eyes, Dark Magician, and Toon World. So let's find an older card that has a lot of text on it for the game to render in. Let's go with Slifer, the executive producer. Here is Slifer on Switch 1 on the normal zoom in, and it's rough. You see jagged edges around the level and attribute orbs, and the text is borderline unreadable in handheld mode. Here is Slifer again on Switch 2, and it looks exactly the same. There actually is a very small difference, but you can't really see it when you just look at the game. I took 2 screenshots in OBS and stared at them for over 5 minutes, and I eventually saw it. If you look really closely, here is Switch 1 in the screenshot, and it has a very slight blur on it, and as we swap over to the Switch 2 here, you can see a little less blurring. Now, if you told me that you didn't see it just now, I wouldn't blame you. It's so minimal that you have to stare and focus on it to see it at all. That's not a great start for Switch 2, so let's move on to load times. My first test was a simple login. I had both platforms having signed in earlier in the day to avoid that notification newsfeed screen, so it is just from the title to when you can move around the main menu. I did these tests on the same Wi-Fi connection at home, and both Switch and Switch 2 were using Wi-Fi and not Ethernet. On Switch 1, it made that login journey in around 19 to 20 seconds total. On Switch 2, it took around 14 seconds. Next, I tested loading a saved replay. I chose a ranked match from late last year, and you'll notice a lot of stuttering on Switch 1. But with both of these going at the same time, Switch 2 managed to load the replay in around 12 seconds, while Switch 1 doesn't load into the replay until around 20 seconds. And finally, I loaded into an online ranked duel. This is a bit unfair as it's based on the connections of both players and your online opponents are chosen at random. But from the opponent being found to the decks materializing onto the playing field, the switch took around 25 seconds. When I did the same thing on Switch 2 under the same conditions, the whole process was around 19 seconds. That leaves us with the actual performance of the game, which is actually pretty good once you get into a replay or a match. To start things off simple, here's a video of the Switch 1 going through a saved replay where I go into a combo to use Millennium Ankh to summon the unstoppable Exodia Incarnate. It has a flow to it, but every animation is jerky and choppy outside of the Ace animation itself. Here is the same part of the replay on Switch 2, and it looks a lot smoother. Every animation has a fluid flow to it, and the Ace monster animation looks that much higher in frame rate as well, giving me hints of what appear to be somewhere in the 40 to 60 range. When we get to online live matches, the Switch 2 does better, but it's not perfect. The starting process of finding an opponent in the coin toss stutters very heavily on Switch 1, as you can see here, with it struggling through those animations, especially when you get to the transition between the coin toss and the actual duel. This is much smoother on the Nintendo Switch 2. It's not perfect, but you get a couple stutters here and there instead of big stutters everywhere. Once you get into the match, things smooth out and are pretty good. Looking at Switch 1 during a match with my Toon deck, it's pretty much the same as what we saw in the replays. Everything has a flow to it, but it all looks choppy. The animations jerk around and they work, but there isn't that flow that comes from frame rates above 30 to 40. It's perfectly playable in this state, but it isn't smooth. but it is on Switch too. It doesn't look like a straight 60 FPS, but it's certainly in the 40 plus range pretty much the entire match. Once you get past these stutters of transitioning into the duel, it's a great and smooth flow until you have to transition out of it. Even the ace summons flow at a higher frame rate. Now, looking at all of this performance, I would still call it a big improvement. It does stutter in the same transitions and places the Switch 1 stutters, but far less. Several stutters on the Nintendo Switch going into the Duel Pass or missions to collect rewards turns into 1 or 2 small stutters on Switch 2. And that's all I have to say, so as we always do in these videos, here is a comparison showing the two versions side by side running at the same time in online matches. And that's it for today. I'll be back soon with more Switch vs. Switch 2 comparisons and new reviews. As always, comment your suggestions or requests below, and please don't let it be East 9 until the thing goes on sale so I can actually grab it and test it for you guys. But anyways, thank you for watching, and have a great day.